A normal morning began at a large construction site in Georgia. It was September 4th, and the sun rose over the new Hyundai LG battery factory. But this calm morning quickly turned into something very different. Hundreds of armed federal agents arrived at the site. They raided the factory, which was being built in Elabel, Georgia. This event quickly became a major international crisis. The agents arrested many workers. More than 300 of these workers were from South Korea. They were put in handcuffs and taken to special detention centers. This action caused strong anger and worry in South Korea. This raid happened at a very important time. Just 2 weeks before, South Korea and the United States had announced a huge agreement. This deal was for a massive $350 billion in investment. The goal was to help build important supply chains in the U.S. and away from China. The Hyundai LG battery factory was the most important part of this new partnership. Officials in Georgia called it a once-in-a-generation opportunity. It was meant to be a symbol of strong friendship and business cooperation. However, the raid changed everything. The U.S. government said the operation was part of a criminal investigation. But to South Korea, it looked like a betrayal. This single event set the stage for a story of broken trust between two close allies. It raised big questions about their future together. 2. The Big Raid. The Big Raid happened on September 4th, 2025. It began very early in the morning, around 6 o'clock. Hundreds of armed federal agents arrived at the Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia. They carried special papers called search warrants. This operation became the largest single immigration enforcement action in U.S. Department of Homeland Security history at one location. The raid was planned with great care, like a military mission. Agents moved fast across the very big construction site. They did not target people who were just unskilled workers. Instead, they arrested skilled engineers and technical experts. Many of these workers were from South Korea. They had advanced college degrees and special knowledge about new battery technology. These were not people simply looking for work. They were important professionals sent by large companies to help build a crucial factory in the United States. The agents put handcuffs on these workers. They also put metal chains around their waists, legs, and wrists. After that, they made the workers get onto buses. This treatment was very upsetting, especially for people in South Korea who later saw videos of their citizens being taken away. The human cost of the raid was immediate and sad. Workers described scenes of confusion and fear. Many reported that agents did not read them their legal rights, and no one offered interpreters to help them understand why they were being detained. More than 300 South Korean workers were then transported to the Folkestone ICE Detention Center in Georgia. There, they faced very difficult conditions. They were put into 5 holding rooms, which were made for only 72 people each, but held over 300 detainees. This meant the rooms were very crowded. Inside, workers saw mold on the mattresses. The rooms were cold, and they had little access to clean bathrooms or personal hygiene items. Steve Schrenk, a special agent leading Homeland Security in Atlanta, defended the operation. During a meeting with reporters, he said it was not just an immigration arrest. He explained that it was a 6-month criminal investigation. However, this explanation brought little comfort to the people of South Korea. They watched their highly skilled citizens treated like common criminals on international television, which caused a deep sense of anger and hurt. The raid deeply affected the trust between the two countries. 3. A broken promise. The raid at the Georgia factory showed a bigger issue. It happened after South Korea promised to invest a lot of money in the United States. This promise was for $350 billion. South Korea wanted to help the U.S. build important factories and supply chains. This was a big plan to move key manufacturing away from China and bring it to trusted friends like America. The Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia was the most important part of this deal. It was called the crown jewel. This factory, costing $7.6 billion, would make new batteries for electric cars. Only 2 weeks before the raid, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung stood with U.S. President Donald Trump. They celebrated this huge agreement in the Oval Office. They said it would create many new jobs and bring new technology to the U.S. This factory was very important for America to make its own electric vehicle parts. However, a big problem became clear. The United States needed special skills for these new, advanced factories. Many of these skills, especially for designing and building complex battery lines, were not easily found in the U.S. So South Korean companies sent their expert workers. These workers had special knowledge and training that American workers did not have yet. Jose Munoz, Hyundai's CEO, stated that building such a plant needed specialized people because many skills and types of equipment are not readily available in the United States. This situation created a conflict. The U.S. government wanted foreign money and factories, but it also took strong action against the foreign workers who brought the needed skills. The raid did not only hurt the Hyundai LG project. Other major plans were now also in danger. For example, Samsung Electronics had promised to build a $37 billion computer chip factory in Texas. Korean Air had also planned to buy $50 billion worth of planes from the American company, Boeing. These big investments meant thousands of new jobs and important technology for the U.S. Now, these projects also face trouble. Companies worried about sending their skilled workers to America. The raid made many people wonder if the promise of a strong partnership had truly been broken. This sudden change in how the U.S. treated its partners caused deep concern. 4. The visa problem. At the center of the growing crisis was a complicated problem with visas. Many skilled South Korean workers at the Georgia factory used B-1 business visas. These visas are generally for people visiting the U.S. for short business activities, such as attending conferences, negotiating deals, or brief training sessions. However, the exact rules for what kind of hands-on work was allowed under these visas were very unclear. This lack of clarity created a difficult situation for foreign companies. For many years, the U.S. government had seemingly allowed this practice. Korean companies had often sent their technical specialists to U.S. facilities using these B-1 visas. They believed these activities fell within acceptable limits for necessary setup and training during large industrial projects. Because this had been a common practice, the federal raid came as a sudden and shocking change in how the rules were being enforced. It caught the entire industry by surprise. An immigration lawyer, Charles Cook, who represented some of the detained workers, explained the situation as a legal gray area. This meant the guidelines were not clear, leading to different interpretations. The U.S. immigration laws were simply not designed for the needs of modern industrial projects. These large-scale developments often require a large number of temporary foreign experts for specialized tasks. These experts are needed to install complex equipment, program systems, and transfer advanced knowledge that is not yet widely available in the U.S. Seoul, the capital of South Korea, had been asking the U.S. for years to create a dedicated E-4 visa category specifically for Korean engineers. Such a visa would provide a clear and proper way for these necessary workers to enter and work temporarily. However, progress on this new visa category had stalled in the U.S. Congress. Anti-immigration feelings, which were notably strong during the presidency of Donald Trump, made it very difficult to pass new laws that would create more pathways for foreign workers. This meant the U.S. legal system could not keep up with the demands of its own industrial goals, making the situation even harder for South Korean companies and their vital investments. 5. Angry friends. South Korea reacted very quickly and strongly to the raid. Their government saw the event as a big problem for their country. President Lee Jae-myung called an emergency meeting right after the news came out. He said the situation was extremely bewildering. He also warned that this event could change how South Korea views investing in the United States. It was a clear sign that the friendship between the two countries was in trouble. To show how serious South Korea was, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun traveled to Washington. He carried a very strong message of protest. It was one of the firmest messages ever sent by South Korea to the U.S. government. South Korean officials used words that were usually not heard between close allies. President Lee called the raid an unjust infringement on South Korean people and businesses. The Foreign Ministry clearly stated that the rights of South Korean citizens should not be wrongly harmed during U.S. law enforcement actions. This strong language showed how upset and disappointed the country was. Inside South Korea, the anger was widespread. People from all political groups agreed that the U.S. action was wrong. Even newspapers that usually supported the U.S. alliance spoke out against the raid. For example, the Chosun Ilbo newspaper called it a merciless arrest operation that should not happen between friends. The Dong-A Ilbo newspaper warned that it could stop future business. Another newspaper, Hankyoreh, asked if this was how the U.S. treats an ally. A leader from the main opposition party, Song Eun-suk, called the raid an unprecedented diplomatic disaster. This unity among different political parties was rare. It showed how deeply hurt and betrayed South Koreans felt. They saw the arrests as a national humiliation. Many people could not understand why their skilled workers, who were helping to build new factories in the U.S., were treated like criminals. This unexpected event caused a lot of anger and made many South Koreans question their long-standing friendship with America. The bond between the two countries was now under great stress. This strong reaction was not just from the government. Across South Korea, regular people, news channels, and political groups all agreed on one thing: the U.S. had acted wrongly. The images of their engineers who were helping build important factories being handcuffed and taken away filled many with a deep sense of national shame. They felt betrayed by a country they thought was a close partner. This shared feeling of anger brought all parts of South Korean society together in protest. They believed that America, a country they had trusted, had broken its promise and disrespected their citizens. This event changed how many South Koreans felt about their alliance with the United States. 6. Business stops. The raid on the Hyundai LG factory quickly caused big problems for business. Korean companies stopped their work across the United States. They paused new investments in many places. Work stopped at dozens of factory sites, affecting important parts of the economy. These included places for making cars, ships, steel, and electrical parts. This halt in work spread across many states, showing the wide reach of the crisis. The Hyundai LG battery plant in Georgia lost a lot of money each day it was closed. Experts said the factory could lose around $2.4 million every day due to delays. This was a huge cost for the company. LG Energy Solution, a very large battery maker, told its workers and partners to stop building. They needed clear rules about visas. Many South Korean employees at different factory sites in the U.S. were told to go home because of the unclear situation. Production at the plant was now expected to start much later than planned, perhaps even next year. This crisis also hurt American companies that were partners in these projects. General Motors and Ford, for example, were working with LG Energy on important battery projects. Now, their plans for making electric cars faced big delays. This was a problem for America's goal of leading in electric vehicle technology. Samsung Electronics also had a huge plan for a $37 billion computer chip factory in Texas. This very important project, meant to strengthen American technology, was now being looked at again. Other big projects, like new shipbuilding plans that the U.S. president had personally supported, were also put on hold. Korean business leaders became very worried. For many years, they thought the U.S. was a stable and safe place to invest a lot of money. The raid on the Hyundai LG plant quickly changed this idea. Companies started to rethink all their plans for the U.S. A survey showed that many big Korean companies, about 10 out of 14, were now thinking about changing their U.S. projects. This could mean delayed timelines, fewer Korean workers sent, or even a full review of whether to continue the projects at all. Korean officials clearly stated that their plans for huge multi-billion-dollar investments in the U.S. could not go forward. This would happen unless the U.S. government quickly addressed the concerns about immigration actions. It was hard for companies to commit hundreds of billions of dollars to projects if their own skilled workers might be arrested and held. The raid created a lot of worry and fear among Korean businesses, forcing them to slow down or completely stop their work in America. This clearly showed that the trust between these economic partners was badly broken, with real and immediate financial impacts. 7. A hard choice. The raid at the battery plant showed a big problem in American policy. President Donald Trump's government wanted foreign companies to build new factories in the United States. It aimed to bring many jobs and new technology. But at the same time, the government arrested the very people, the foreign experts who were needed to make these projects happen. These experts had special skills in building advanced factories and installing complex equipment, knowledge that American workers did not yet have in enough numbers. Hyundai CEO Jose Munoz said clearly that they needed these specialized people during construction because the skills and equipment were not easy to find in the U.S. This created a hard choice for companies: invest in America, but risk their skilled workers being suddenly detained. The raid created a lot of worry and fear among Korean businesses, forcing them to slow down or completely stop their work in America. This clearly showed that the trust between these economic partners was badly broken, with real and immediate financial impacts. This made the large $350 billion investment deal between South Korea and the United States very uncertain. The deal, which aimed to bring critical supply chains back to the U.S. and create many American jobs, was already facing problems. South Korea was finding it hard to get such a huge amount of money ready without risking its own economy. Also, there were difficult talks about the terms of the deal, like how profits would be shared and other important rules. The raid made these talks even worse, creating a crisis of confidence. South Korean officials asked how they could promise hundreds of billions of dollars if their own people could be arrested and put in chains. Without a clear solution for worker visas, the entire deal was now in danger of collapsing completely, putting future projects on hold. Because of this incident, South Korea started to think differently about its global plans. It was forced to ask if the United States was truly a reliable partner for such big investments. This was a major change, as South Korea had aimed to work more closely with the U.S. to move away from relying on China. But seeing its skilled workers treated like criminals made the country lose trust in a serious way. South Korean leaders warned that if their workers could not come to the U.S. safely, companies would reconsider their investments. They began looking at other countries, like those in Europe or Southeast Asia, or even discussing closer economic ties with China. These places often offered clearer and more welcoming rules for skilled foreign workers. The U.S. risked losing not only the $350 billion investment, but also important technology and future factory projects to other parts of the world. 8. The future. The raid at the Hyundai LG factory in Georgia marked a very important moment, a real turning point. It deeply changed the strong friendship between the United States and South Korea. Trust, which had been built carefully over many decades of alliance, was suddenly and seriously broken. This event clearly showed a big problem with America's immigration rules. These rules are outdated and do not work well for the complex needs of modern factories and global business today. The high cost of this old policy became very clear. The U.S. government truly wants foreign companies to invest large sums of money and build new factories in America. President Donald Trump himself has often spoken about wanting foreign experts to come and teach American workers special skills needed for these projects. He clearly stated he did not want to frighten off or disincentivize investment into America. But the factory raid sent a confusing message. Highly skilled Korean workers who were essential for these very important projects were arrested and treated like common criminals. This action made Korean companies very afraid to invest more money in the U.S. They seriously started to question if America was truly a safe and reliable place for their money, and, more importantly, for their people. This situation created big, long-term questions for the future of both nations. Can the two longtime allies truly fix their friendship and rebuild the deep trust that was shattered by this painful incident? It will be very difficult. Will America be able to succeed in bringing important manufacturing jobs and factories back home if its own actions scare away its most important international partners? The incident also made South Korea seriously think about investing in other parts of the world instead of relying heavily on the U.S. It clearly showed that building trust takes a very long time and hard work, but it can be lost very, very quickly with one bad event. In the end, trust is like the most valuable money you can have. It is the most important thing between countries and businesses. Without this trust, even the biggest plans, like the huge $350 billion investment deal, and the strongest partnerships can easily fail. The raid was a clear and hard lesson for everyone involved. It showed that clear and modern laws, especially for skilled people moving for work, are needed for global business to work well and for nations to stay friends. What do you think will happen next for these two countries?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.